Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. Our tradition is to go around and introduce ourselves first before we hear from our speaker. Just by a show of hands, is there anyone here for the first time? Great, we'll try and remember your name as we go around so we can make you feel welcome during our social period activities. My name is Tom.
My name is Douglas.
Benjamin.
Francesco.
Tim.
Harvey.
Jim.
Prasad Chita.
My name is Rich.
My name is Michael.
Ed.
I'm Greg. Mark.
Dennis.
My name is Cass.
I'm Jack.
Richard.
I'm Shantan.
My name is Oswaldo.
Jeff.
My name is Jerry.
My name is Ray.
I'm Clint.
My name is David.
My name is Harley.
I'm David. Jay.
Joe.
Mike.
I'm Val.
Peter.
Grisha.
I'm Brad.
Welcome, everyone. Our speaker today is David Lewis. David has been following the Dharma path for over 40 years and has a degree in comparative religious studies. He attended his first retreat in the Tibetan Shambhala tradition at the age of 17 a few years ago and has been practicing Vipassana meditation since moving to San Francisco 25 years ago. He's a longtime member of the Gay Buddhist Fellowship and also leads a weekly sitting group for seniors every Friday morning. David's graduate Spirit Rock Meditation Center's dedicated practitioners program and has been on the teaching team for Spirit Rock retreats. Today we will hear part 2 in his series on the Paramitas. David, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here this morning. Some of you may or may not have been here last month, and I did part 1 of the Paramitas. The Paramis, or the Paramitas in Sanskrit, are known as the 10 perfections, and they're practices and intentions that we can use in our everyday lives. And last month, if you missed it, I talked about dana, sila, and renunciation. Dana is generosity, sila is virtue, and renunciation. And this month, I was going to talk about the next 3 or 4 on the list, which would be wisdom, energy, patience, and truthfulness. But last month I got kind of overwhelmed just talking about 3, so I can't promise you we're going to get all the way through all 10 paramitas. I don't know if I can do it. And I started, as I was doing research for this part, for this talk, I really kept coming back to wisdom, the first of them. So mostly I think that's what I want to talk about today is wisdom. And I might do it in a slightly different way than I approached it last month. The Buddha did not offer a belief system. And that's hard for a lot of us Westerners because we're used to viewing spirituality and religion and philosophy as something we believe or we don't believe in, or buy into or don't buy into. And the Buddha really discouraged that. He said, once you have views and opinions, once you have beliefs about something, that closes all kinds of doors to possibility. So the Buddha offered practices, very practical practices to help us deal with suffering and dissatisfaction in our lives, and practices to optimize skillful behavior which leads to happiness in our lives. Buddhism is a very practical path. I won't even say religion. It's a path. For most people, it's something you do. The three core practices that the Buddha offered were, two of them I talked about last month: dana, or generosity; sila, or virtue; and bhavana, or meditation. So in Asia, where most traditional lifelong people who are born into Buddhism practice, the vast majority of people that we refer to as Buddhists, they might not even call themselves Buddhists, might not meditate. It's a thing more for monastics in Asia. But they do practice every day dana and sila, generosity and virtue. They try to have good, skillful behavior, practice kindness and compassion, and also in countries that are traditionally Buddhist, Burma, Thailand, Tibet, the community of practitioners supports the monastic system, and that's generosity. That's one way that they show generosity. Is, every day in Thailand, the monks go out with their begging bowls, and people line up along the roads and put food into the bowls, and it's a practice. It's not only a very practical thing of feeding the monks who are not allowed to feed themselves, but it's a daily practice of generosity. It's considered a core practice. So there's nothing in any of the Buddhist suttas that requires you to meditate, or for that matter, to practice dana or sila, but they're all recommended. So as I said last month, I talked about generosity and virtue. And today, in the context of the next parami on the list, wisdom, I'd like to talk some about meditation, because they're closely related, if not the same thing in Buddhist practice. I just want to say one thing about this idea of practice, is that it's something that I'd like you really to consider incorporating in your life, some aspect of dana, sila, or meditation. A teacher of mine said that trying to understand the dharma or appreciate the dharma as a belief system is like perpetually reading the menu and never eating the food. So, if you've been reading the menu for a few years, as I did for many years in Buddhist practice, I read books, I listened to dharma talks, I was reading the menu. Try the food. Try dana, sila, and bhavana. Generosity, virtue, meditation. Wisdom in Buddhism, in this practice of practice, path of practice, is not the way we think about wisdom in the West. It's not an accumulated store of knowledge. Wisdom is an innate, intuitive seeing of the nature of things, which is dharma, or dhamma. One definition of there's a lot of definitions of dharma, but the two main ones are fundamentally the nature of the way things are, and the other is the accumulated teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha's teachings are dharma. But the context I'm using is the nature of things. So wisdom, quite simply, in Buddhism, is seeing the nature of things. And in the Buddha's teaching, that includes the three characteristics, which are impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. I gave a talk a while back about the three characteristics. It's the nature of things. It's the nature of being human. It's that a great deal of life is fundamentally unsatisfactory, and that steers our behavior, mostly unconsciously, as we're responding to unsatisfactoriness in our life. We want more of what we like, and we want less of what we don't like. We want to optimize the pleasant. It seems quite natural. We want to optimize the pleasant, and we want to decondition or push away the unpleasant. But the very act of doing that, of responding, of reacting to pleasant and unpleasant in such a reactive way, the Buddha taught, creates more suffering in our lives. Second characteristic is anicca, or impermanence. And that might be a little bit easier to wrap our minds around and realize, yeah, everything changes. We're born, we get old, we get sick, we die, we lose our friends, we move, we change jobs, the grass grows. And the third characteristic is anatta, not self, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Another fundamental dharma, or nature of thing, is the Four Noble Truths. So wisdom recognizes the Four Noble Truths to be true. So wisdom is very closely related to right understanding, which is a factor in the Eightfold Path. So wisdom can almost be thought of as a verb as well as a noun in Buddhism. Understanding things on a daily basis, on a momentary basis, understanding our experience in the context of the three characteristics and the Four Noble Truths. It's also defined as discernment. So there's three types of wisdom, probably more than three, but I'll talk about three briefly. The first is conceptual wisdom, and that's the wisdom that we're most familiar with in the West. Conceptual wisdom is what we get from books and listening to Dharma talks and thinking about the pros and cons of various points of view and making a choice and having views and opinions. It comes quite naturally to us, and it's probably what we're most comfortable with. But the Buddha was skeptical about this kind of wisdom. Skeptical, he warned us against views and opinions, which is a fairly radical concept. And again, the Buddha said that once we have views and opinions, we close the doors on considering it might be otherwise. In other words, we become narrow-minded when we have views and opinions. Second kind of wisdom is the wisdom of practice. And that's when we take something like impermanence, Buddha's teaching on impermanence, and apply it to our own experience. Like, how does this work for me? And one way that we do that when we meditate, even here Sunday morning at GBF, is we sit in meditation and we watch our mind and notice what's going on. And probably the first thing that you notice, if you're paying attention, is that everything changes. This thought leads to that thought, leads to another thought, then there's a bodily sensation, and then that bodily sensation goes away, and then we hear a sound, and then there's another thought. It's just a process of very rapid change, meditating. It's largely based on sense contact. The Buddha said, the Buddha taught that in addition to the five senses, I know you've heard this before, in addition to the five senses, the mind is the sixth sense. So thoughts it's like sounds rising in our experience. we don't have to take them any more seriously. So that's the wisdom of practice. And then there's the wisdom of realization. And wisdom of realization is clear knowing. Knowing something intuitively, knowing something from your gut. And that arises out of practice. Practice is volitional. It's something we decide to do. Realization is intuitive. It comes to us. You can't really make realization happen, but you can set the conditions for it to arise, and it will come at the right time. The wisdom of realization is also called insight. Mindfulness meditation is sometimes referred to, especially in my the tradition I practice in, as insight meditation. And you can think of the word insight, it's seeing within, it's understanding ourselves. So all of this is about not only understanding the nature of reality as impermanent and unsatisfactory and not self, but it's understanding how we respond to it. And understanding ourselves as unsatisfactory, impermanent, and not self. So that's why wisdom and this way of gaining wisdom through practice rather than through views and opinions has been called against the stream. There's even a school of Buddhism now that's referred to as against the stream, because it's basically against the way, it's counterintuitive to the way we do things in the West. So it's a little bit of a challenge. It takes some energy. It takes energy and it takes patience. Energy and patience, along with wisdom, are paramis, on the list of paramis. So it might be hard for us to trust as Westerners, and I think sometimes that's what makes meditation hard for people. The father of science, modern science, Sir Isaac Newton, said, "Truth is the offspring of silence and unbroken meditation." Sir Isaac Newton. Truth is the offspring of silence and unbroken meditation. And I ran across another quote that I really like that I couldn't quite fit in, but I just really want to share to you. There's I believe it's 13th century, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, 13th century Christian mystical text called The Cloud of Unknowing. We don't know who wrote it. They're anonymous. But it was a British 13th century Christian mystic who said, "And so I urge you, go after experience rather than knowledge. On account of pride, knowledge may often deceive you, but this gentle, loving affection will not deceive you. Knowledge tends to breed conceit, but love builds. Knowledge is full of labor, but love full of rest." It's very Buddhist, I think. So when we look at the Christian mystics, we have a lot in common with what the Buddha taught. It's not something magical. It's just something intuitive. It's an intuitive understanding of our experience rather than knowledge. The same distrust of views and opinions and belief and dogma, basically. Mistrust of dogma. Here's a quote on effort. Again, this is one of the paramis we're talking about today. Effort or energy with wisdom is the healthy desire to know and understand whatever arises without any preferences for the outcome. And that's really a beautiful description of what we do when we meditate. I'm sorry we don't do meditation instruction more at GBF, because for me, in my practice, and even after 40 years of practice, I love to be kind of reminded what to do to meditate. But one of the things we do, or one of the options, is to simply sit, pay attention to our experience without adding anything to it or taking anything away from it. This is insight. This is an inner looking. We look within. That allows us to see the causes, motivations, and effects of what we're doing. What we're doing is karma. Action. Karma is action. And to respond to that rather than to react. Fundamentally, we learn to connect with life right where it touches us in the moment. And that changes all the time. A thought, a bodily sensation, a sound. So the goal is to become more mindful. Not just when we sit in meditation on Sunday mornings at GBF on our cushions or chairs, but to become more mindful in everyday life. And to let the practice support us. I've got to say it's easier to do it on the cushion in meditation with a group. I've had people tell me, oh, well, meditation's really hard for me, so I just try to be mindful in everyday life. My experience is just the opposite. Being mindful in everyday life is more challenging than sitting down and focusing on exactly what's happening right in the moment. But it's also my experience, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, that if we have a fairly consistent meditation practice over a period of time, and not necessarily a very long period of time, mindfulness starts to become automatic in our everyday life. The practice really does support us. It certainly is true for me. The practice has changed me, changed the way I respond to my mental habits, my psychological habits. Mindfulness is not about getting rid of thoughts, and it's not even about thinking differently. It's about what I just referred to. It's about changing our mental habits or psychological habits. So we start by paying attention to what our habits are without being judgmental about them. There's a strong element of compassion here. Because very often when you may have experienced this, when we sit in meditation, we pay attention to what comes up, sometimes we're slightly horrified. We all have murderous impulses. Fortunately, most of us don't act on them. We just notice what's coming up without adding anything, without taking anything away. That's the first step. And then we try not to follow our thoughts. I recently read a quote from a Tibetan teacher that said, meditation is simply not intentionally following our thoughts. So, if nothing else, try that when you meditate, not following your thoughts. It means that just like as a sixth sense, our mind produces thoughts just like sounds happen, or just like bodily sensations happen. They're all just phenomena, bubbles of phenomena, like bubbles rising up from the bottom of the sea and popping to the surface and then disappearing. Thoughts are no different than sounds, bodily sensations, smells, tastes. They come and go. They're impermanent. They all exhibit the three characteristics. The other thing we can do in meditation, and there's a lot of different practices, which is another reason why I like instruction in meditation, is people offer alternatives. You get bored of one practice, you can do another practice. Another thing we do is cultivate skillful mind states and decondition unskillful mind states. So there's ways of deconditioning anger, fear, resentment, boredom, loneliness. Just like we can condition, we can work with happiness, joy, love, gratitude. It's a practice. We cultivate skillful mind states and decondition unskillful mind states. Energy, again, one of the paramitas, along with wisdom. Energy is the resource that resists the pull of psychological habits. So, when we're meditating or in everyday life, when we notice a psychological habit, say anger arising, if we notice it, if we recognize it, then we can make the choice, and this takes some energy, we can make the choice not to go down that path, not to follow it. When it arises as present, we don't deny it. There's nothing wrong with anger. There's nothing wrong with fear. They come up, they pop up all of their own. They're conditioned phenomena. But we don't have to follow them. We don't have to feed them. So this is a challenging concept, especially for beginning meditators, because we think that we're not supposed to be feeling those things. We think if we're good Buddhists and if we're good meditators, we shouldn't get angry, or we shouldn't be fearful, or we shouldn't have any unskillful feelings or thoughts. But I can tell you, I've heard the Dalai Lama say it, and it's my experience too, that we get angry. And when we get angry, if we're not mindful, we slip into our reactive responses. And that's an interesting thing to observe as well, is to know what our reactive responses are. Sometimes just recognizing what our reactive responses to negative feelings or thoughts are cause them to dissolve. Like, oh, there I go doing that thing. I've often referred to, I like to use the example of reading the morning newspaper. I used to be a real news junkie. And I still check in for the New York Times at some point every day. But it brings up a lot of stuff for me. Very often I get angry. Very often I feel despair, especially in the past week. It's been a bad couple of weeks, and in world news, there's boats sinking in the Mediterranean, and earthquakes in Nepal, and young girls kidnapped in Nigeria, and Baltimore. Just curious, I'm just checking in. You don't have to say anything, but if I say the word Baltimore, do views and opinions come up for you? I've heard so many views and opinions.
Especially if you're born there.
Sorry?
Especially if you're born there.
Yeah, there you are. So it just goes to show that that's what the mind does. A trigger like Baltimore brings up a lot of stuff. So what's important is not the stuff arising. That's conditioned. That's based on our mental habits and our upbringing and what we've been taught. What matters is how we respond to it. Our conditioned habits and responses. Wisdom discriminates between skillful and unskillful mind states and intentions. Energy gives us the resources to set boundaries and act on them. So a lot of this mindfulness practice, meditation practice, is about setting boundaries. Do I want to go there? Do I want to follow that thought or not? Is it skillful? Is it unskillful? That's discrimination. That's wisdom. Choosing between the skillful and the unskillful. We don't use good and bad. heavy judgments in Buddhism, but we talk about the skillful and the unskillful. The skillful being what leads to freedom, liberation, happiness, and unskillful what is that which leads to suffering. And a lot of our intentional chosen responses to the world are unskillful. It takes a while to sort that out and see that. It's useful to learn our unskillful habits. The most obvious example of that is our addictions. You know, things we choose to do, heavily conditioned habits that are unskillful. Doesn't necessarily have to be substances. It might be work. It might be relationships. It might be our smartphones. It might be online pornography. All these things that we originally did to distract ourselves and to make our world a little bit happier and to make ourselves feel better, eventually can become unskillful. It's an interesting place to start with our addictions. Patience is the next parami. I'm just going to say a few words about patience. But in terms of what I've been talking about, our mindfulness practice, being in the moment, paying attention to what's going on, patience is the acceptance part. Patience is the acceptance of something, say maybe anger, without adding anything to it or pushing it away. That takes some patience. Because our automatic response, if we feel an unpleasant feeling, is to turn away from it, right? To do something, maybe do one of our addictions or just push it away and stifle it, pretend like it's not happening. Patience allows us to stand under a feeling and truly feel it and experience it without adding anything to it. Patience is useful in a traffic jam. Right? Our conditioned response, our reactive response is to get pissed off, to be mad, blow the horn, get frustrated. But whether you do that or not, whether you go down that road or not, you're still stuck in traffic. Nothing changes. So if you can have some patience, apply some patience to your life, you're still stuck in traffic, but your mind's not suffering nearly as much. So that's the difference between the first arrow and the second arrow. That's the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is being stuck in traffic. Suffering is being pissed off about it. Patience is what allows us to stand under an uncomfortable feeling or sensation and not go into our reactive responses. So I want to give a personal example, which I don't do very often. But I don't want to present the paramis as something that's kind of academic or something to believe or something to understand. The paramis are a practice. It can be really helpful in life. Some of you know that I'm HIV positive and have been for 25 years. And when I first became positive, it was fairly early on in the epidemic, and I was pretty sure I was going to die. In fact, my first doctor told me I was going to die within a year. So I was terrified. And then I moved to San Francisco basically to get better treatment for HIV, and I got involved in the whole AIDS movement, from ACT UP to founding Project Inform to treatment advocacy. And I was living here at the height of the epidemic, and I lost most of my friends, most of the people that I got to know initially when I moved here. Were also HIV positive, and a good many of them died. And that was terrifying. So I have a lot of conditioning around fear and HIV. But over the years, it became a chronic, manageable condition, and I quite easily slipped into denial about it. But that fear is still there someplace. And every time I get a bad cold or something happens, it comes up. Not every time, but frequently. So about a little more than a month ago, I became allergic to one of the drugs in my drug regimen that I've been taking for about 6 years. And it made me really uncomfortable. I was actually in a certain amount of pain for about a month. And I couldn't change my regimen right away because it's not that easy to do, especially when you've been positive for 25 years and you've taken everything else. So I had to stay with this regimen that was causing me pain until I could get it changed. And I did eventually get it changed. So during that month, when I was in pain and I was wondering what was going to happen, there were three kind of conditioned habitual, there were three lines of thinking that I was really tempted to go down. First one was that they're not going to find another regimen for me, and I'm going to have to live in pain like this for the rest of my life. Second one was they're going to find a new drug regimen that I can go on, and it's going to work fine, and it's going to keep the virus down, and I'll feel a lot better, and everything will be okay. And the third one was that I'm going to switch to a new drug regimen, it's not going to work, and I'm going to die fairly soon. On any given day, all three of those presented themselves as a line of discursive thinking and fantasy and thought that I could follow if I chose to. And I was very grateful when I noticed that, and I know this is due to my practice, my meditation practice. I was very grateful to notice that when any one of those temptations arose, even the one that said everything's going to be okay, I said, well, yeah, maybe that's true, but I don't have to. There's no point in me following that path. There's no point in me following that line of thought because I don't know if it's true or not. I can't predict the future. It's interesting to notice how desperately we all want to know the future. And we can't. So staying in the present takes some patience and some energy. So that's one way that my meditation practice supported me, because when I meditate, I notice mind states arising and I choose whether they're skillful or unskillful and whether I'm going to follow them or not. And when I'm on the cushion, more often than not, even skillful ones, I choose not to follow in order to have some peace. But one night, in the midst of this month, when I'm congratulating myself on my wisdom and how well I'm dealing with this drama in my life, one night I just got washed over with fear. It just came up out of nowhere like a volcano. And my response to that was conditioned by my practice, my dharma practice also. My response to that fear was I really wanted to just give myself over to it and say, oh my God, I'm just completely deluded. I'm going to die. This is it. But my next response came very quickly was, oh, this is just fear. This is what fear feels like. This is a conditioned habit of mine that's very familiar. Something goes wrong, and I start reflecting on the fact that I have this life-threatening disease, and I'm taking handfuls of pills, and fear arises. I know that feeling. And so I just stood under it. Just let it be fear. This is what fear feels like. And within about an hour or two, it went away. And I can tell you that 10 years ago, that fear would have lasted for the whole month. So the way my practice worked with standing underneath fear is I saw it in the context of the three characteristics. And I wasn't doing all this intellectually. It just kind of automatically happened because I meditate. I saw the discomfort of it. This is really unpleasant. And it's a great practice when you're experiencing an unpleasant sensation or feeling, or you're caught up in some sort of drama, to just put your hand on your heart and say, this is dukkha. This is unpleasant. And have some compassion for yourself. This hurts. Second characteristic is impermanence. I thought, okay, I know how fear works. It comes up, it goes away. It's impermanent. This fear is most likely not going to be permanent because it's never been permanent in the past. And the third characteristic is not self. This fear is simply my conditioned response. This is something that I learned 25 years ago. And whatever can be conditioned can be unconditioned. This fear is a mental habit of mine that I don't need to follow. It doesn't need to rule me. It's not inherently me. It's a mental habit. We call them sanghas in Buddhism. Psychological habits, mental habits. So that was a certain amount of comfort to me in my worst moment, in the last moment. It hurts, but it's not permanent. It's not inherently mine. I went to sleep that night, woke up the next morning, everything was okay. At least in my delusive state, everything was okay. So I'm not claiming, I'm certainly not claiming to be wise, because I certainly don't feel that way. I feel very much like a beginner in practice. But I know how my practice has supported me, and I really appreciate how that showed up for me in everyday life, in real life, in the past month. And I'm very grateful for the practice. I have a lot of passion for Buddha Dharma and for meditation because of what I intuitively know to be true based on my own experience, not on my belief, based on my own experience. So I'd like to wind up by reading a couple of, a poem and a quote, both of which, I know at least one you've heard before because I've shared it, and I think Tom shared it once. And the poem you might have heard before, but they bear repeating. The poem's called Daikini Speaks by Jennifer Wellwood. The Daikini Speaks. My friends, let's grow up. Let's stop pretending we don't know the deal here. Or if we truly haven't noticed, let's wake up and notice. Look, everything that can be lost will be lost. It's simple. How could we have missed it for so long? Let's grieve our losses fully like right human beings, but please, let's not be so shocked by them. Let's not act so betrayed, as though life had broken her secret promise to us. Impermanence is life's only promise to us, and she keeps it with ruthless impeccability. To a child, she seemed cruel, but she is only wild, and her compassion is exquisitely precise, brilliantly penetrating, luminous with truth. She strips away the unreal to show us the real. This is the true ride. Let's give ourselves to it. Let's stop making deals for a safe passage. There isn't one anyway, and the cost is too high. We are not children anymore. The true human adult gives everything for what cannot be lost. Let's dance the wild dance of no hope. And related to that is a quote from Jeff Foster that I just love. You will lose everything. Your money, your power, your fame, your success, perhaps even your memories. Your looks will go. Loved ones will die. Your body will fall apart. Everything that seems permanent is impermanent and will be smashed. Experience will gradually, or not so gradually, strip away everything that it can strip away. Waking up means facing this reality with open eyes and no longer turning away. But right now, we stand on sacred and holy ground, for that which will be lost has not yet been lost. And realizing this is the key to unspeakable joy. Whoever and whatever is in your life right now has not yet been taken away from you. This may sound trivial, obvious, like nothing, but it really is the key to everything. The why and the how and the wherefore of existence. Impermanence has already rendered everything and everyone around you so deeply holy and significant and worthy of your heartbreaking gratitude. Loss has already transfigured your life into an altar. So thank you for your kind attention and letting me talk about me for a change.
Thank you, David. We have time for a few questions.
Or comments or reflections. Please, David.
I've been through an experience with my dog lately. I found out 6 weeks ago that he had cancer. And my dog is like my closest friend in the world. And it's always, it's just a wonderful soul. And I was completely devastated. I for several days I could not walk him without crying, having tears in my eyes. It's like I had this vision of his dying and being lost. And so, anyway, the thing that sort of got me through this was educating myself about his disease and finding out and reading up and finding out that he wasn't actually just going to die. I was expecting to go in there and die. He was going to be dead on the living room floor the next day or something. He is not dead. I was just having to adjust to the fact that he has his disease, and it's like it's actually more information. I got more information about him, and he seems to be in better spirits than ever. He's happier. He's going through chemotherapy. He's handling it great. And I'm like giving him these pills and stuff. And he doesn't even know what he's going through. But anyway, it's just my understanding of, I don't know what I'm saying, except that I'd sort of intellectualized this whole relationship that I'd had with him. And now I have more information about it and a better understanding of my true, literally, he is going to die, but I'm going to die. I don't know. It's just like the whole thing's shifting.
Well, and you're having feelings too.
What?
You're having feelings too.
I am. Yeah.
So I just say honor those. Honor the. I'm sure you're worried and concerned, but the one thing you said that really rang true to me is you said your dogs, seems to be feeling fine despite the fact of what's going on. I can relate to how your dog might be feeling, because that's one thing I reminded myself of in the middle of my big drama about even living with some pain because of medications making me uncomfortable, is if I sat very still and closed my eyes and just checked in with exactly what was happening in the moment, as dogs are good at doing. Dogs are great at being in the moment. There was nothing wrong. So no matter what's going on in your life, this is true for everybody, no matter what great dramas are going on in your life, sometimes it's efficacious to take a deep breath, check in, what's actually going on right now. Is there pain? Is there suffering? Is there worry? And if we just take a deep breath and check in with just our senses, what's actually going on in the moment, there's nothing wrong. we all have these stories about what's not right in our lives, right? Maybe it's a relationship or a job, or we've been evicted from our house, or we don't have enough money, or we're hungry and we want lunch, whatever it is. We tend to gravitate towards what's wrong. But if we really check in the moment, there's nothing wrong. So, and yes, we're all mortal. Your dog's mortal, and you and I are, and we're going to die. But as that last quota said, that's a cause for gratitude and love in the moment. So love him up, or her, him or her, your dog. Love him up.
Maybe one last short one.
Benjamin.
Yeah, just I appreciate that you talked about the Buddhist perspective on views and opinions, at least holding on to them. And I appreciated that you talked about impermanence. But I think that frequently we think we recognize impermanence, but I think it's hard to recognize that views and opinions are basically our attempt to create permanence. And that perhaps that's why the Buddha was so willing to caution us about that.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's so true. Views and opinions, rites and rituals are attempts to create permanence, which is a delusion, right? Great thing to recognize. Thank you for that.
David, thank you so much. So Donna is Pali word for generosity, as David eloquently spoke of. It's what sustains our sangha. So please, as you leave, find the Dana bowl, contribute what you can. Suggested donation is around $10. Yes.
My name's Mike, and I'm the host this morning. And in addition to the Dana bowl, there are some plates with fruit and cookies and a savory kind of cheese twisty thing. Anyway, and if you drink tea, please put your cup in the basin with the soapy wet.
Michael.
Hi guys, my name is Michael. I'm on the GBF Board of Directors. And a suggestion has come up for us to make a contribution toward earthquake relief in Nepal and humanitarian aid. And we don't really have a straightforward way of polling the Sangha, so this is our best opportunity. So first of all, I just wanted to get a show of hands of people who feel like that's a good idea or support that idea. Okay, great. And the second thing is the organization that we would contribute to. I made a suggestion, the Seva Foundation, which is a Berkeley-based organization. They're known for restoring sight to blind people, particularly in the Himalayas, but they are conducting a drive right now for earthquake relief. But if anybody else has other organizations that they want to suggest, we're very open to hearing about that. And then lastly,
I just want to add, the Saver Foundation has committed to providing 100% of all donations directly to service, and they've been, on the ground in Nepal for many years, and between Nepal and southern India, have already restored the sites of over 1 million people and over 1 million cataracts operations. They have connections to high level people.
so the last issue would be the amount of our donation, and I have to kind of trust our treasurer, Peter Washburn, in terms of how fortified the coffers are. But Peter, do you have any?
Well, I think we could spare up to $5,000 without significant risk. We have an upcoming retreat. That's our usually biggest expenses for the downtown.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thanks for your feedback.
So just to piggyback on that, if anybody's interested in giving an individual donation and has not yet, there was a good New York Times article that listed several organizations, and it had a link to PayPal, who has agreed not to charge any fees for like about a dozen organizations that they list on their site. I'll go ahead and post that to our Facebook page and to our Yahoo group email list. Any other announcements?
I have a request.
Yes.
We're in need of one or two more individuals to volunteer as hosts for occasionally filling in for hosts who are unavailable. It doesn't involve a lot of work. It's basically plugging in the hot water, seeing that there are treats available for the social hour, and circulating with the dharma bowl. And it's a good way to give back to the sangha. So if anybody's available to do that, please speak to me during the social hour.
And it's only once every 2 months, I believe?
On a regular basis, if there are regular slots, it's once every 2 months, but we also would have a need for people to do it just occasionally on film.
Great, thank you. We have time for one last poll, which I was going to do anyway. I didn't realize we were going to do that. So David mentioned his interest in or yearning for instruction before the meditation, or leading into the meditation periodically. Other people have mentioned this, and what we would do is, if we were to do that, it would just be conducted by one of our speakers who is willing and versed in that sort of thing. So just by a show of hands, would anyone be interested in that on a periodic basis, maybe once every 6 weeks or a couple of months? Okay. Would anyone like to see it more frequent than that? Okay, a few. Would anyone like no instruction ever whatsoever? I mean, and feel free to raise your hand. I mean, it's, some people just like, hey, I come here for the silence and stuff.
There's brief instruction, and then there's instruction that keeps dropping in throughout the whole period. It just sends me into rage. I'm happy to...
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So who would like just a lead-in? Okay, I think that's the majority. Okay, so that's how we would frame it if we do that. Any other comments before we? Because I think that sounds like something we could do periodically. Yes.
I particularly appreciate that, because I think I've been coming about 3 years, and my perception is that the group has a sense of itself, of people having a certain, shall I say, understanding or experience with meditation, but as new people come in, they don't, and I'm one of those people. And I'm periodically bewildered by, there's a need, I think, for more education, and this would serve that.
Great, thank you.
Does the website have any tips?
No, it doesn't. However, I have a series of 5 guided meditations, professionally produced and everything, that are PLR, private label rights, meaning they can be, distributed. So I'll see about getting those up on the site. They're not particularly Buddhist, but they might be some. But in my searches, maybe I'll find something else that we could put on there. That's a great suggestion. Any last comments before we wrap up?
It might sound like a crazy idea, but I'll just put it out there. When we have group discussions, to have a recorded guided meditation of some choice.
Oh, for a group discussion.
Yeah, before the group
That's
discussion.
an idea. Okay. Yes, David?
One thing I'd just like to bring up is that I've heard different people comment on this is the right way to meditate and this is not the right way. And I sort of get turned off by that, because I think there's a lot of ways that people meditate that work for them. I've been taught many ways, so I would just like to mention that, not to make judgments about different approaches.
Right.
And
Yeah, we
there
can
might
lead
be
in with
different
that. Say here's
approaches.
just one.
There's no right way or wrong way.
Yeah. Okay, great.
We're non-denomination.
Yes. We do need to wrap up, but yes.
Just one quick suggestion. We talked about this briefly in the past. The major kind of focus, group focus for instruction and meditation, etc., is the yearly retreat. But not everybody can go on that, and I would wonder if, as I said, I know I've asked about this before, and I think others have too, if, say, a couple times in the year there would be a kind of day of meditation or day of instruction, maybe just not a full day, even a half day, even just here, like some Sunday afternoon, where, you know, you could have instruction, you could have maybe some discussion, you know, but I've gone on the retreats and I appreciate them and the effort that goes into them, but I think not everybody can go.
You mean like do a day retreat here?
Yeah,
or
yes, like
city
once or
retreat
twice a year.
Okay, thank you. I hear you. Great, thanks everyone. Let's gather in a circle for our dedication of merit. And as we gather afterwards for our social period, please make Richard feel welcome. Hello, Richard. Thank you for joining us. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be freed from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.